guys, my name's Adam if this is your first time here. Today I'm going to be talking a little bit about pro wrestling, specifically the the top 7 times that hell apparently froze over for the WWE. This is basically, I wanted to make this list to show people that just about anything can happen in the world of wrestling. So let's start with number 7. Number 7 is something that maybe people don't really realize is as shocking as I thought it was, is the headline of WrestleMania 20, which is Chris Benoit and Eddie Guerrero headlining WrestleMania 20. Now, it's a little bit controversial now because of obviously the whole Chris Benoit situation. You know, that memory has sort of been tainted since. With that said, having watched these guys wrestle, you know, they were 2 of the best on the planet at the time. They were basically not used very well in WCW, and they made it to the top. They were headlining WrestleMania, and not just any WrestleMania, it was WrestleMania 20, which was a milestone WrestleMania at that time, and it still is a milestone WrestleMania, although it's not as acknowledged openly. So these are basically 2 of the best wrestlers on the planet headlining the biggest event on the planet, which is WrestleMania, which is generally headlined by bodybuilders and guys that usually can't wrestle. To me, that was a pretty huge moment. You know, being a wrestling fan, like a real wrestling fan, a fan of the actual in-ring product, that was pretty special and really felt like hell must have frozen over because suddenly the guys that should be in the main event are. Number 6 is recent news, actually. The Ultimate Warrior being inducted into the Hall of Fame. I'm sure everybody knows that Self-Destruction of the Ultimate Warrior DVD that came out, it sort of exposed a lot of the sort of butting heads that Vince and the Warrior have had, specifically that the Ultimate Warrior held up the WWE and Vince McMahon for more money and threatened to walk out of a pay-per-view unless he got more money. The other one is that, I mean, obviously because of that, the WWE's wasn't looking to do business with this guy, but obviously, if you've followed the Ultimate Warrior at all outside of what the WWE has put out for him, I mean, with the exception of that DVD, if you've sort of seen behind the paint, I guess you would say, and what he's like as a person, he's a really stubborn, very, you know, blinders, has his way of seeing things, and that's not a bad thing, but very dialed into his way of seeing things, and I'm sure once he saw that DVD, he made up his mind not to ever go back to the WWE. Number 5, this was a huge deal to me, and I'm not sure that it gets the credit as being as mind-blowing these days as it did at the time, is WCW being purchased by the WWF. I remember when this happened. I remember, you know, wrestling was still really cool at that time, so a lot of people were into it. And I remember trying to tell people, like, you need to hear what happened, but you're not going to believe me. You have to go to WWF.com, because if I tell you that WWF purchased WCW, you're going to think it's a BS rumor. But on the website, WWF.com, all it had was a picture that said WWF's logo, the word purchases, and WCW's logo. I remember looking at that picture, that page, for like a couple minutes and letting it sink in and processing it and seeing like, that's WCW's logo. They're not just making this up. Like this, they wouldn't be able to put that on their website with WCW's actual logo unless they actually purchased the company. Blew my mind at the time, and other people said, like, they wouldn't have believed it unless they actually gone to that website and saw it for themselves. In retrospect, a lot of people maybe aren't aware of just how big of a deal that was to have lived through, but it was huge at the time. Number 5, actually that was number 5. Number 4, I've got my list over here. Number 4 is just after this, at WrestleMania 18, actually No Way Out, is Hulk Hogan making his triumphant return to the WWE. Hulk Hogan was, okay, obviously Hulk Hogan was a huge star in the 80s. He was the #1 guy for a long time, and then he went to WCW, and basically is a big reason why the WWF was, you know, at a risk of being run out of business. And with that said, on a personal level, Vince McMahon was going to, you know, was being on trial because of the steroids issue, and Hulk Hogan actually testified against him. He turned his back on the guy that kind of made him. Because of that, Vince McMahon has said that he would never work with Hulk Hogan again, but, you know, hell apparently froze over, and Hulk Hogan was welcomed back, and he had a huge run. You know, a lot of people really enjoyed his time in the company when he came back, and a lot of really cool moments, like a standing ovation for like 7 minutes or something like that in Montreal. Very cool. And of course, The Rock, his match with The Rock. Number 3. Yes, number 3. This one is sort of a combination of a lot of things being encapsulated into one point, because I didn't want to make a giant list of a bunch of different things. This is Vince McMahon, Eric Bischoff, and Paul Heyman all being in the same ring. Now, I could have said, I could have made a point for Paul Heyman working for the WWE, or Eric Bischoff working for the WWE, but instead I encapsulated it into one. Of course, the moment when Vince McMahon hugs Eric Bischoff when he surprisingly shows up out of nowhere was a pretty shocking moment, and a lot of people thought that in and of itself was hell freezing over, but I'm sure that a lot of people would have never believed that those 3 promoters who were competing against each other a short while ago would all be in the same ring working together. Number 2, huge moment in the history of the WWE is Bret the Hitman Hart returning in January 4th of 2010 after having been screwed by the WWE and Vince McMahon in November of 1997 at the Survivor Series. I believe it was November 17th, but I'm not sure the specific date. But November of 1997. That's something like a 13-year gap between his absence and return. With that said, there's obviously a lot of animosity. Bret Hart was obviously very angry towards the company, towards Vince McMahon. You know, he basically destroyed his legacy in one event, and Shawn Michaels. What was kind of the most surreal moment of this was Bret Hart and Shawn Michaels burying the hatchet on live TV. There's a lot of things in wrestling that are produced and written, and, you know, they're not reality. This was about as real of a moment on live TV in front of an audience of I don't know how many hundreds of thousands of people, or, well, not hundreds of thousands, but I mean in the audience, I don't know how many thousands of people were there, and millions of people watching across the world. That was about as real of a moment as has ever happened in wrestling history, and it was as surreal of a moment as has ever happened in wrestling history. With that said, what could possibly be number 1? Well, I'm sure if you're a wrestling historian, or you've even been following, you know, the Hall of Fame in the last couple of years, you probably already guessed it. It's Bruno Sammartino being inducted into the Hall of Fame. While Bret's took something like 13 years, I think Bruno's was something like 20 or 30. Bruno has not been in contact with the WWE for several decades. He is basically, if you don't know, and I hope you do know, Bruno Sammartino was sort of the Hulk Hogan of the company before WrestleMania, even before Vince McMahon owned the company, and he is recognized as having the longest title reign in WWE history. The company has tried to sort of brush him under the rug and not acknowledge him, but the fans are smart. Like, you know, we're smart. We know the truth. We know about the history. And, you know, it was very difficult for the WWE to have this Hall of Fame. It's not a legitimate Hall of Fame without Bruno Sammartino in it. And they couldn't get him in. Once they finally accepted the fact that they need to induct him and they can't hide him from the audience's memory or erase him from the audience's memory, they tried to reach out to him, and he didn't want anything to do with the product. He recognized that it was an adult product for a long time, and that there was a lot of steroid use and things happening that he didn't agree with, the things with women, stuff like that. WWE has since cleaned up their act quite a bit, although the steroid thing, I don't know. I mean, there's definitely some people in the company that still are using some sort of enhancements. Let's leave it at that. With that said, incredible news. Bruno Sammartino was able to bury the hatchet, return to the company, and is now in the Hall of Fame. Huge news. With that said, that's my 7 hell froze over moments. I'd love to hear some of yours, because I'm sure that you're maybe not going to agree with some of mine, and you're probably going to have a few of your own. I was going to put Randy Savage working for the WWE on this list, but the fact is he sort of had such a insignificant... I mean, he really didn't work for the WWE. He did a commercial for a video game that was a WWE video game, and he's been featured a few times on WWE TV. Unfortunately, we're not going to see Randy Savage, a living Randy Savage, inducted into the Hall of Fame, which I think really should have happened, especially by now. I'm sure that eventually he will be put into the Hall of Fame because, I mean, I hope that whatever it was that has happened is, you know, in the past now, and fans really do deserve to see him there. That would be the one thing that I would have to redo this list for, but that's really all I have to say. Let me know what your hell froze over moments are. Thanks for watching. If you like this, please subscribe, because I'm going to do more lists like that, and I'm going to talk a little bit more about pro wrestling on this channel. And, you know, have a good day.